Hello. So first, I want to say thank you to everybody here for inviting me today. It's been a great weekend so far. I've met some really great people, and I don't like talking in a podium. That makes me feel awkward. But I do want to say a minute. I want to talk a minute about the gym that you all have with Tom Pierce. Many of you all know him. Some people describe him as this crazy organizer. But Tom is really a great asset to the Sierra Club. Tom has been a great asset to me, and Tom has as well. So I always want to honor that with Tom because he's an amazing person. So, and you know what, I'm going to get a little bit more comfortable because it's after dinner. I know everybody likes to get a little bit more comfortable. So the first thing I want folks to do, I want you all to join with me tonight because I know after dinner folks get sluggish and want to relax and get coffee and stuff like that. So feel free to roll up your sleeves if you want to take your coats off. Now, I'm going to ask us to all do something practical. I want everybody to stand up with me. If you can stand up, I want everybody to stand up. If you see somebody sitting next to you that can stand up and they're not, I want you to nudge them and get them to stand up. So that everybody in the room standing up. And we've got time. I've got an hour, so don't worry about that. Now, once we're all standing up, I want everybody to look around. Just glance at the person next to you for a minute. And once you do that, I want everybody to dig into their pockets or your wallet, your purse, your pocketbook, wherever you keep your money at. And I want you to find $100. Now, bear with me. I'm not asking you for your $100, but I want you to pull it out. And if you don't have cash, I want you to pull out a credit card or debit card. And if you didn't bring any of that with you, I want you to grab a pen or a glass or a piece of paper. And I want you to hold it in your hand. And I want you to imagine that it's $100. And I'm going to wait for everybody because I want us all to be thinking about $100 here. And bear with me because I'm going somewhere. Now. Is everybody ready? Okay. Now I want us to begin thinking about that $100. And I want you to think about what that $100 means to you. And it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But I want all of us to think about what does that mean to us practically? What does it mean? For some folks, it means a great deal. And for other folks, it doesn't mean much. But I want us to think about for a minute what that means to us. So you can all sit down. But I want you to hold on to that through the course of this evening. And I want you to hold it in your hand. I want you to be thinking about it. Because I have a story to tell you all. And once we're all settled down, I want to tell you a story about $100. And I want to tell you a story about how I came into the environmental justice movement. A year and a half ago, when I came on the staff at Jobs with Justice in Kentucky, I came on as a fundraiser. And one of the first things I was asked to do was to make some phone calls to residents in Rubbertown. We had to fight with Xeon Chemicals, and we had the settlement, the class action settlement coming up. And Attica said, Flaco, can you make some of these calls? Because we've got to get the word out to these people. And so I took the list, and I took the script, and I started making calls. And a lot of people, I got their voicemail. I looked at big, long voicemails that they probably deleted. And other folks I gave my spiel to, and they said, well, yeah, okay. We're trying to get folks to a hearing at the federal courthouse. We're also trying to make folks aware that with this settlement, they had two options. One, they could accept the settlement and take a really small sum of money. And when I say small, I mean really small. And they would also be barred from any litigation against Xeon Chemicals for prior or future health injuries. And so as I'm making these calls, I'm thinking, how does that affect me? I live in West Louisville and, never heard of Xeon Chemicals, and I'm new on staff at Jobs with Justice. And as I was making these calls, I called one lady, and I won't share her name, we'll just call her Edna. She answered the phone, and I ran my spiel down to her. And I said, can you make it out next week to this hearing at the federal courthouse? Do you need a ride? And do you know that if you don't physically, manually opt out, you're going to be included in that class action. And you'll be barred from litigation for your health issues related to Xeon Chemicals. And she asked me my name, and I said Flaco. And she said, Flaco, let me tell you a story. And for purposes, we'll call her Edna. She said, my name's Edna. And she said, I'm 85 years old, Flaco. And I've been living in this house the majority of my life. I live a little over a mile from Xeon Chemicals. And she said, Flaco, death is knocking at my door. I've got lung cancer. I've got diabetes. I've got asthma. My life is about over. And she was like, Flaco, I want you to know that I know everything you're trying to tell me. And she's like, Flaco, do you know that because of where I live, a little bit over a mile from Zion Chemicals, all I'm going to get is $100. And I want you to think about that $100 that you have in your hand. She said, Flaco, all I'm going to get is $100. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's not going to help with my medical bills. I don't have health insurance. And my asthma inhalers cost $60 or $70 a piece when I have to get them. $100 isn't going to mean anything to me. And I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting it. Nobody said, Flaco, you might actually talk to somebody who knows what you're talking about. And I would love to sit there and tell you all that we had a really in-depth conversation and we had a one-on-one and we got her out there, but I didn't see her at the court hearing. But I never forgot that conversation. Because to me, that was a conversation, that was someone that $100 didn't mean anything to. Not because she didn't have it, or not because she had a lot of money, but because it was nothing in comparison to her health problems. And she told me about her kids and her grandkids. And some of them went on to do good things in life, and some of them did mediocre things, and one of them was in jail. But the $100 didn't mean anything. And on the flip side, I want to tell you one more story about $100. A couple weeks ago, I got a phone call from somebody. Didn't know me, I didn't know them. They didn't know anything about Jobs with Justice, but they had heard from somebody that maybe they should get in contact with Jobs with Justice. And the story about her $100 is a little bit different. There was a policy enacted on January 2nd at her place of employment that required her to bring $100 to each shift that she worked to make change for customers and to tip out other employees. While at the same time, any tips that she got on credit and debit cards, in which this restaurant relied heavily on the debit and credit card process, because it's not a cheap place to eat, they only got those on their paycheck at the end of the week now. She said, Flaco, I don't have $100 to bring every day. And if I have to bring $100 a day and I have to give away $50, and I have to come up with another $100 to make it tomorrow, and day after day after day until paycheck time, she said, Flaco, I don't have $100. And as we hold that $100, I want you to think about it. Her job told her if she did not bring that $100, she couldn't work there anymore. And she showed up on January the 2nd, and she told her boss, I want to keep this job. I've talked about it with my coworkers. It's a struggle for that $100. I don't have it today. Do you know the employer's response? Well, some of you know the answer to that. She was fired on the spot. They hired another person because they didn't have $100. And as she began telling me her story and about her family and a little bit about who she was 5 months pregnant. She had a 2.5-year-old son. Her husband worked, but he was unskilled, and he worked for low wages. And she said, Flaco, my husband makes enough to pay the rent and the utilities. And with what I make, I buy food. And we don't have health insurance, so we cover any health-related issues with our child. She said, Flaco, I don't have $100 to bring every day repeatedly, and I need my job. That was a Thursday evening. And as I began to talk to other people there that evening and the following morning, it went far deeper than that $100. And what inspired me from this group of people was the fact that they realized what $100 was worth. And they realized that without a job, they can't feed their families. If they have to front their employer money, they may not be able to feed their families. And we began to work together because they said in 2 days we're going on strike. We can't take it. We cannot do this. We can't live. So what if we get fired? We can't feed our families. And we worked together really fast, in a really short period of time. And when we talk about restaurant workers, a lot of people say, well, they're unorganizable because the turnover rate. And people say, well, they don't really care about workers' rights. But they're human, and they're people who cannot afford that $100. And so I want you to hold on to $100 because we're going to come back to it in a little bit. But I want to show you a quick clip about that $100. Can you all hear that in the back? Okay.
Alongside former and current employees of
Well, it doesn't matter because you know the story.
Yeah, no, just do that. We can hear it.
Can you hear it? Okay.
One of the most popular restaurants in town is under fire by the people who work there today. Kentucky Jobs with Justice, alongside former and current employees of Lynn's Paradise Cafe, started their campaign in the hope of getting things changed. Bakery's Jamie Weiss is live outside the business on Barrett Avenue. And Jamie, why are they so concerned?
Well, Janelle, these employees are concerned about a number of things. Everything from not being notified in time for shifts, harassment, and a new policy that requires all servers to have a $100 bank on them when they start their shift to tip out other employees, which some say is illegal in the state of Kentucky.
This one is titled Paradise Shouldn't Be a Nightmare.
The stories are endless.
One specific instance that comes to mind is when they fired Meg.
And almost hard to believe when you learn they come from a Louisville tourist attraction known for hosting kids in their PJs on New Year's Day.
This is very popular.
So even the executive director of Kentucky Jobs with Justice, Flaco, Aleman, was taken aback when the workers started coming forward.
Just the amount of disrespect and abuse, verbal abuse, was the accounts, some of the accounts brought tears to my eyes.
He, along with several volunteers, current and former employees, are the ones responsible for the flyers left on cars surrounding Lynn's Paradise Cafe. They're on a mission to educate.
So if the restaurant workers are fed up to the point that they're ready to take action, it's more than just a case of a disgruntled employee who's mad over a simple issue.
They're all coming forward after 2 people were fired just last week due to a new policy.
It was January 2nd that I was terminated. That was the day that the new policy for $100 for each server went into place.
This worker, who wanted her identity hidden, said as a single mother it was just something she couldn't do and reached out to management.
Expressed to her my concerns with it, that I thought it was unreasonable and that I couldn't do it, and was there any way I could move to a hostess position for the rest of my duration there. And she said because I contacted her that day, not previously, that I couldn't do that, and for me to not come back into work.
Aleman says it's a policy that's not only inconvenient for those living paycheck to paycheck, but against Kentucky law.
The law says workers cannot be forced to take people in Kentucky. It can be an agreement, a voluntary agreement, but it cannot be forced.
He says it's just one example of an unfair work environment, and most people who didn't like it weren't even told they were fired.
They'll take you off the schedule, just tell you to call each day, and they'll tell you if they have a spot for you on the shift, with the hopes that after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you'll quit calling, and then they can just put you down as no call, no show, and quitting.
Despite what's been done, no one involved wants to see Lynn's closed.
And what I want to see done is the policy changed, and maybe a few other things changed at Lynn's to ensure that the employees there now and in the future have a fair work environment.
So in the future,
This is hello. My name is Melissa, and I've worked at Lynn's Paradise Cafe from June 2009 to February 14, 2010.
the stories are ones of a place people are happy to say they work.
Okay. So, that coverage was from a couple weeks ago on Friday, January the 11th. Moving to count a great group of folks and a brave group of folks. The second part of that story is later that same night, about 1 o'clock in the morning, they were all fired. Everybody. Management, employees, everybody was fired with no explanation, no notice. Many of whom found out from the news the next day when they were getting calls from reporters saying, hey, what do you think about being fired? Now, I don't know about you, but that's not a way I want to find out that I'm fired. 2 somber stories. 2 stories that I wanted to bring you today to talk about what we're here to talk about today. Environmental justice and workers' rights. I told you one story about environmental justice and another one about workers' rights. But I also want to talk to you tonight a little bit about why environmental justice is the backbone of workers' rights. And for that, I want to start with a definition. So that way we're on the same page. Because one thing I've learned is that in order for us to have a good conversation, we need to understand the same terms, what it means to you. This is what he told me. And I said, okay, I can work with that. I can match that to my first exposure to environmental justice. And I'll give you another definition. I'll give you a definition of workers' rights and what workers' rights means. And again, we're not going to go from a textbook definition. I want to tell you what workers' rights means to me, because that's what I do for a living. And I want to keep it short and sweet because I want to make it practical. And when someone asks me, what does workers' rights mean to you, Flaco, it means not only the right to collectively bargain, not only the right to organize in the workplace, but it also means, just like with these restaurant workers, that it means the right to work in a workplace free from harassment, free from intimidation, free from bullying. Because you see, the $100 was only the tip of the iceberg. There was a lot more to the story. Workers' rights means you have the right to work in a workplace free of sexual abuse. Workers' rights mean that you don't go to work every day not knowing if you're going to be fired because Big Brother's looking at a camera from California. Going to work every day doesn't... Workers' rights means not going to work every day wondering that if you don't let your employer steal your recipes, that you're going to be fired. That's what workers' rights means to me. And so when we think about it, when we think about workers' rights, when we think about the environmental justice movement, and we say, how are they interrelated? How are they connected? And me and Tom talked a lot about this. He said, Flaco, what are you going to talk about? What's important? What do you have to say that's important to the folks here in the Sierra Club? And for me, it was easy. It was natural. I said the two go hand in hand, Tom. Workers' rights, environmental justice, you can't have one without the other. And he said, can you talk about it? I said, yeah, I can talk about it. I can talk about it all day. But there's no sense preaching to the choir, right? But there are two main reasons, or two ways that works out that I'm going to point out. And I'm going to spend just a short period of time about it because I think we all know that. Environmental justice is the backbone to workers' rights in America, not just in Kentucky, but in America. Because with environmental justice, you have to have people to work to carry out the environmental justice. And just because people are part of social justice and environmental justice and movements like this doesn't mean they don't deserve rights in their workplace. They go hand in hand. I don't want Tom here working for the Sierra Club if Tom has to worry about getting bullied at work, or if he has to worry about not getting paid. Because Tom fights for environmental justice. But Tom deserves workers' rights as well. And the other way, the more practical way that the two are tied together is because when we talk about our workforce, when we talk about their rights, they can't go to work and be healthy and perform their jobs. They have to wake up every day and look at all the toxic chemicals that are spewed into the air right outside their house. One thing that Edna told me, as she was telling me her story, and she told me about all her years living in that house. She said, Flaco, I lost count of the days that I walked outside. My flowers were dead. My rose bushes were covered in soot. Vehicles had to be washed, and sometimes it wouldn't come off. And she said, I don't care about a lawsuit, Flaco, because I probably won't live to see it. I probably won't live to spend it. She's like, but if you want my opinion, I know why I'm sick. Environmental justice is important to the workers' rights movement because if our workers cannot get to work and perform their duties in a healthy manner because of bad companies, because of mountaintop removal, because of polluted streams and polluted airways, they can't have workers' rights. And so that's all I'm going to say about why they're important and how they connect, because to me it's simple. When I thought about it, it didn't take me long to figure that out. I don't think it needs a lot of explanation. And as I was here talking to folks, that last week and the week before, I worked on a speech, and I had a really long speech wrote out. And I got here yesterday, and I talked to quite a few folks, and some good folks. We had some good conversations. And one thing I remember somebody saying is that, Flaco, we're glad to have you. I've heard a lot about you. And I've heard that you're a firebrand organizer, that you're fiery, you have a lot to say and a lot of energy. And, you know, I said thank you, and it's flattering, but I don't think that applies to me. You know, somebody else said, Flaco, you're a brimstone and fire organizer. And it's flattering, you know, and compliments are always nice, but I don't think that applies to me. When I think about what I do and why I organize, for me, it's because I get the urgency of the fight. Just like the urgency is there in the workers' rights struggle, the urgency is there in the environmental justice movement. When I got that phone call a couple weeks ago, and 2 ladies have been fired, and they were set to fire many more, I got the urgency. I told my kid, I said, you're probably not going to see much of me for a little while. Because sometimes in life, it's not just about us, it's about the big picture. And the urgency's there. And I saw it and I felt it inside. And when I began to hear some of these stories, I cried because of that urgency and the need to act immediately and to act and to organize and to act in a manner to address this urgency. People are getting fired. No family members with money. Don't make enough. Make a little too much to qualify for public assistance, but not enough to live by on one income. It's urgent. When I wake up and I go down to District 1 in Louisville, and I talk to a good friend of mine, and we can see the chemical spewing into the air. And I've got my asthma inhaler, she's got hers, and her kids got theirs. It's urgent because it's killing us little by little. It matters, and I get it. And the other thing that I think what some people think that, this organizing style is because of Jobs with Justice and the way we operate at Jobs with Justice and our belief. Whether you see Jobs with Justice in Kentucky, or Kansas City, or Portland, or San Francisco, or DC, or Rhode Island, Orlando, and Atlanta, one thing you'll see consistently is that we get the urgency and we realize that it's a fight. We realize that we can't sit on the sidelines coaching, giving our opinions, and talking theory. It's too urgent. People's jobs are under attack. And so at Jobs with Justice, we believe that to effect the change that we need to protect workers on their jobs, we have to roll up our sleeves, just like I offered you to do tonight. We have to get out in the street, we have to fight. Talking theory is good, but it doesn't give people their rights in the workplace. It doesn't get people back to work. And so at Jobs with Justice, we believe that in order to make that happen, in order to fight back against rights of work, we have to roll up our sleeves and fight. And we're going to get dirty, and it's going to be a long and tiring fight. But that's how we win our fights. We couple that with the urgency, and then we get compliments that we're firebrand and stuff. And they're good compliments, but we're just doing what's right. And so tonight, I want to talk a little bit about doing what's right. Because I see the same sense of urgency as I said through some of these workshops today. And I talked to folks yesterday. And me and Tom talk all the time about environmental justice. We talk about coash plants. The urgency is there, but the next step is what do we do? What do we do with that urgency and that need? Do we sit on the sidelines and talk about it and offer our opinions and talk about theory and things like that? That doesn't win. It doesn't. The only way we're going to be able to win is to actually get out and fight and put our bodies where it matters. And so at Jobs with Justice, We do a lot of things that are similar to other organizations. We take donations. We send out emails. We put out literature. We push legislation. We lobby. We do a lot of things that other organizations do. But one thing that sets us apart, not just in the fight, but is what we call the Jobs with Justice Pledge. And some of you know what that means, and some of you don't. But as we think about that $100, I want to tell you about the Jobs with Justice Pledge, because it doesn't cost any money. But what the Jobs with Justice Pledge says is that I will be there at least 5 times in the next year for someone else's fight other than my own. It's a pledge. It's a commitment. And it's not in a calendar year. From the day I say that I speak those words into existence, that I'm going to be there at least 5 times. And the key point that I want you all to think about tonight, and that we talk about in our movement, the labor movement, with our allies and with our members, is someone else's fight. Because we're always going to fight our own fights, or hopefully we will. But if we want to start winning, we have to start standing up for other people's fights. And that is our belief, that as we begin to stand together for each other's fights, that's when we begin to win. When we take that pledge, we begin to win. Because it's not donations, it's not emails, it's not sitting around talking that wins fights. It's putting our bodies where it matters. And so, to show you a little bit about what can happen when you talk to people about that, let me pull this over here so I can show you. You know, we heard a lot in the last year about the 99% Spring and the Occupy movement. And we heard about Occupy Wall Street. We heard about, you know, the bank shareholder meetings and things like that. And what that meant to us. And what it meant when the Bank of America stock went down to $5. And they foreclosed on home after home after home. When they bankrolled payday lending companies. And all of these things. And we began to talk to folks. And we began to work in connection with other groups. And we began to call on our people who made that pledge. And we said, you need to be there, because this is a big fight. This is just an excerpt of what can happen. Well, anyway, we went to the Bank of America shareholders meeting, and we got there. The first thing I did was count the amount of law enforcement, and I don't know, but I had a rough guess of about 1,100. They had the streets lined. And it sounds like a lot, right? But I want you to look at that picture, and that's a small clip of the amount of people that were there. Nobody counted, but the news reports estimated between 2,500 and 5,000 people were out there, crowded into the streets in Charlotte, North Carolina. Very anti-union, by the way. But we called on our people who had taken that pledge, and we said, here's a fight that we need to be at. This is how we win. This is how we make change in America. And so I want us to think about that. We think about our commitments, and we think about the environmental justice movement. We think about workers' rights, and how do we begin to build that connection deeply. So when we say justice, people know we don't just mean justice in a criminal sense. That when we say justice, and that's what we want in America, that we want workers' rights and we want that we want justice in the workplace. We want environmental justice as well. So I'm asking everybody to stand up again. Those that can, I'm asking you to stand up. And the two things I want you to be thinking about is, what does $100 mean to you? And then I want you to be thinking about, are you willing to be there 5 times over the course of the next year for somebody else's fight other than your own? To some people, just like that $100, that pledge, that commitment means a lot. Family, work, education, time is short. And to other people, that 5 times doesn't mean much. So maybe they have a little bit more time on their hands. Or maybe they sense the urgency of the fight. But I want you to ask yourself, Just as we talked about what does that $100 mean, I want you to think about what that commitment means to be there 5 times in the next year. And I want you to look at the person next to you. And I want you to ask them, are they ready to make that commitment? Because the other part of making that commitment is accountability. Some people are going to hold themselves accountable, some people are not. If you're like me, you always need somebody like Tom who can say, hey, Flaco, how you doing on that? But that's the fact of life, and it's a reality. And that's a huge commitment. And one thing that we do, and this is where it's going to get fun at, I want everybody to take their hand and hold it up in the air if you can. And don't worry, it's not going to be up too long. Yeah, I don't want you to hold it up like you give the pledge. I want you to hold it up like you understand the urgency. And make a fist if you have to. Because that means something to people. That means that we're taking that power in people. That when we're out there with our bodies, fighting for what we believe in, that we're claiming that power and we're going to win. And I want you to say something with me. One chant that we always say, and this is how it's going to go. Some of you are familiar with it, probably a lot of you, but some of you aren't. But I'll ask you, what do you want? I'll say, what do we want?
Justice.
Thank you. And when I say, when do we want it? Now. I hope you're not going to say tomorrow. What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
You got to get a little bit louder. I'm sorry. I know the people working here are going to be mad, but we want people to hear us, because the last thing I want you to think about as we're saying this is that there's people working here as well. And how many of us ask them what it's like to work here? Not saying it's a bad place to work. By no means am I saying that, but how many of us ask them? What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
One more time, and I want us to say it really loud so they're going to come put us out. What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
Now I encourage you to take that pledge to be there 5 times over the next year for someone else's fight other than your own. We'll show the world that environmental justice is the backbone of workers' rights. Thank you.